I will teach you some very important middle game strategies that you can use with the Italian game. So we are going to play pawn to e4, the opponent plays pawn to e5, of course we play knight to f3, we attack the pawn, they protect the pawn like this, yep, and we play bishop to c4. There are a bunch of different things that black can do. The most popular, which is bishop to c5, is also here the move that my opponent, the 2200 rated chessbot, is playing. And I think this is already the most crucial position to really understand the Italian middle game. One big mistake that players make is they don't consider the consequences of their moves already right here. And we have a couple of moves. We can play d3, we can play knight c3, we can castle, and I think we can also play pawn to c3. And those are, I think, the four best possible options that we could potentially play here. Which one is the best option? It depends a little bit on your playstyle, but I will show you what I would do in this position. If you play knight to c3, they play knight to f6, they attack your pawn. Let's say we protect it once more. They castle, we castle, and they play pawn to d6. You can see that we have an almost identical position. And in chess, the thing that you want to do is you want to build up an advantage based on the imbalances in the position. So that means the differences in the position. So the more differences there are in a position, the more opportunities there are to start calculating a middle game plan and formulate a strategy that can help with your advantages or try to fix your weaknesses, basically. But here nobody really has an advantage or a weakness. You can play this, but it's probably going to lead to a very drawish middle game. So that's not what I would recommend. So I would say here knight to c3 is a very weak move. Not because it's losing or bad, but because we just somewhat tell our opponent, okay, we are fine with a very drawish, boring, undynamic position. If you play something else, like for example castles, it's also very easy to all of a sudden end up in this type of position where, yeah, if you play knight to c3, basically you are allowing the copycat. You can still try to play something else, for example, with c3 as well. I think that is possible. And then you can create a little bit more of a dynamic position. So what I am thinking about here is there a move that I can play that my opponent will not be able to copy? And there is actually such a move. And that move is this, pawn to c3. So that is what I am going to play in the game, pawn to c3. And they cannot copy this because they can never play the pawn to c6. Their knight is already here. So that is why I think this early pawn to c3 is a very good strategy in the Italian game. There are a couple of things you can do here. I have a Italian game opening video in which I recommend to immediately strike with d4, which I think can be great if you want to learn a lot of tactical lines and a lot of tricks and traps and things that your opponent might potentially fall for. What I am going to do here is I am going to play in this video pawn to d3, just because I want to show my actual play style, what I would play if I were playing in Italian. And I wouldn't play for tricks or traps or quick attacks, I would play for solid chess. So I play this and they copy me with pawn to d6. So we are now in a position that we have to learn how to evaluate. So we have to look at the entire position and then say what is the advantages for white, what is the advantages for black. So the advantage that we have for white is that we have this pawn here on c3, which is one, taking away this square from the bishop and the knight, and also it is taking away this central square from the bishop and from the knight. And that is, I think, an advantage. What potential plan could come from this? Well, there are actually two plans. One plan is to at some point play this move pawn to d4 and attack in the center, or maybe even at some point play this move pawn to b4 and then maybe try to attack on the queen side even and do a queen side pawn storm like this with these pawns. So you can see that just by having this one pawn difference, we already somewhat have a plan. What is the advantage for black? I don't really think black has any advantage, but they do have one extra piece out in the game. They have 3 pieces and we only have 2 pieces. So, okay. So, as you can see, that is a potential evaluation you should learn how to do for this position. So then I am thinking, what is the next move? You could say I am going to castle, which I think is honestly fine. It's not really going to lead to any troubles. Your opponent will probably castle as well. You could also think about the plans that we have set here with, for example, playing d4 or b4. Or you could think, black has the extra piece, so I am going to develop something. For example, play the bishop here. And with all of these moves, I think it is very important that you try to think, how does these moves fit into my general middle game strategy? So our general middle game strategy is that we want to do something with these pawns, right? We want to push b4 or d4. Is this bishop helping? I don't really think so. Let's say they attack, we trade, they take with the queen. Well, nothing really happened. We just got them the queen out and we got rid of our bishop, but yeah, it doesn't really fit within the strategy. And that is how I also eliminate moves. What is the best plan? I am going to play pawn to b4. And the reason why I do this is because if I don't, let's say if I had castled, you are somewhat playing not that dynamically, and your opponent has the opportunity to basically do, yeah, they can do this, they can do this, they can castle, they can play h6, they can play a5, they can play so many different moves, and there is a potential that your plan is no longer going to work. So that is why I think here, for example, b4 is a good plan. So black is countering us with pawn to a5, which is the best approach, of course, because if they had just castled, they would have immediately lost their bishop, which I think could have really happened with a lower rated player especially. So before we do anything, we have to think what's going on with the last move that our opponent made. So I don't want to think about anything like castling. First I have to simply see that, okay, we have two attackers on this pawn, so we have to do something. We can either defend it, but I don't really see any good way. I think bishop a3 might be the only way, but then, yeah, you are getting into a position like this. I don't know if I really like this, honestly. I think what I am going to do is just kick away this knight. And now you could also see the power of this one pawn on c3, taking away those two squares here, so that the knight basically has to retreat. And again, it's in a very, very passive position. So we already were able to play somewhat of a middle game plan, and by doing that, the position has basically changed completely. And whenever the position changes, you have to re-evaluate it. So let's take a look at it again. What are the advantages for white? Well, we do have a lot of space on the queen side, meaning we are attacking squares into the enemy territory basically, and we also have pawns that are already quite advanced, okay? I think we have a little bit more control over the center because of the c3 pawn still. For example, in the future, we might want to at some point play or plan pawn to d4. I think still that is a normal plan that you can play here as a follow-up. Black, on the other hand, has a little bit of a better structure, I would say, because their structure is, yeah, quite solid, while our structure, it's still okay, but we have to watch out that we don't create a big mess with all of our pawns here. Yeah, we don't want to create a big mess where all of our pawns are hanging. Right now it's still safe, but we want to be careful about that. And I think, yeah, black also still has a little bit more development with the 3 pieces versus 2 pieces. So what is the plan for white? The plan is to play d4. But if we play d4, we immediately lose a pawn, and that is what I was talking about. That we want to make sure we don't start dropping pawns in this position. And I was able to identify that risk by evaluating the position. So I think knight to d2 is a very good move here, because first of all, we are equaling the amount of development. Now it's 3 pieces versus 3 pieces. And we are also preventing this pawn from falling, so that we could, in the future, play this move, pawn to d4. And now the big question is, my opponent castled. Should we also castle, or should we continue with the plan and play a little bit more dynamic? Because now black has the extra advantage. They have a safer king than our king. So that is the question. Should we castle first, or should we push? Those are really the only things I am thinking about in this position. So I am gonna quickly check if I castle. I mean, at first sight, everything looks solid. I don't think anything is going to happen. Maybe they will attack this, but it doesn't really matter. Maybe they will trade. It also doesn't really matter. I think we can take with both pieces. And I don't see anything spectacular for black if we castle. So if you don't have a lot of time, if you're playing a quick online game, castling is a quick move you can throw in. But it's always worth to also calculate, can we play this? And is there some potential counterattack that black can do? So first of all, if they take, and we take, white has the 2 central pawns, which I think will be an advantage here. We have 2 central pawns, but we also have to make sure that we can hold on to them. Because they can be attacked from all sides of the board. Like this bishop is attacking, this knight is attacking. So we have to always watch out we don't lose the pawns. Of course, black doesn't have to take. They could also play something else. And I think, especially for black, always the pawn push pawn to d5 is a good plan. Here, since the 2 knights and the queen are supporting, that might be a plan as well. And then things got very hectic. I think we will have to take. They can maybe push, attack or knight will have to move. Then they can start grabbing this in the center. Let's say we take this, and now this is under attack. So you can see that slowly our position is somewhat getting super complex. So this move will require us to do a lot of calculation, and I think it is better to always be safe first. I have this principle which I call control, prepare, attack. You always first want to be in control. You want to be safe. You want to have good development and safety in your position. Then the second thing you want to do is prepare your plan, and then you want to execute it. If I had played immediately, I would have done the attack first, while I think I have to do the control and prepare step first. My opponent is immediately going for this plan, which is the best plan for them. I can move back the bishop, but if I move back the bishop, black basically equalized in the center, so I am going to use this pawn to take. But equalized, I mean now they also had 2 pawns taking away so many squares. But if we trade, we are still the one with a little bit more control over the central square. So that is why here I would take. So it's 2 pawns in the center versus 1 instead of a little bit of a 3 versus 2. But this one doesn't really count that much, honestly, in that previous position. Okay. Again, the position has completely shifted, so we have to calculate a little bit again what is the plan here for both players. First of all, it looks like my opponent is giving me a free pawn. It looks like they are giving me a free pawn. Because the moment they pushed, they already gave me the free pawn, but I had to solve this first, which I did by capturing. And yeah, they basically have to either try to protect this or do something. For example, I thought they were going to play knight to g6 and then later on try to recapture. But they didn't. They recaptured immediately. So we have a free pawn. Whenever you have free material, you have to think, is this safe or is this a trap? Very important. We have a free pawn, but black also has a free pawn, as you can see. So if we take, black can take, and then our queen is also under attack. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad variation, but if you want to play this, you will have to calculate. Because, yeah, you are playing a little bit more risky. I think probably you can just play the queen to b3, attack the knight. But they can go here with the check. Maybe they can go there. And you can see it's just one big mess. And, yeah, I don't really want this to happen. So I am going to see if I can just solidify the position. So I'm not going to take the free pawn. I am going to protect this pawn, because if I protect this pawn, then, yeah, the plan is going to be simpler. We still have the threat of capturing here. So queen b3, I think, is a good move, because first of all, we are attacking f7, which is a very common middle game strategy, and the Italian game as well. You want to attack this f7. Plus, we basically fixed this weakness while also allowing us to capture here. So I think now we just have this free pawn. Yeah, and they move the knight. Okay. So we are up material, and if you play chess the right way and you play strategically and you play as I showed during this video, you will oftentimes be up material. Sometimes it will be a piece, like for example, we could have trapped this bishop earlier, they could have misplayed something. Sometimes it's just going to be a pawn. But usually as soon as you are up material, you have to try to keep pushing your advantage into the late middle game and even into the end game, because we still need to convert this advantage into a win. With their last move, they basically challenged us to do some massive trading. I think trading is a good idea because in general we already have the extra pawn, so we already have a little bit of extra material. But you also want to be careful, because just having one extra pawn is not always enough to just win the game, especially in the end game. One pawn, it's not always gonna be a win. So we don't want to trade everything, but trading a little bit here is not a bad plan. This is under attack twice. So we might have to push it. That's one thing. I wonder if we can also ignore it and just try to continue with development. Because if they take, they also weaken this. And we also have a counter attack there. And it's important to identify patterns like this, where we have this diagonal towards the king, which is very crucial in the Italian game. And basically this knight is a defender. And that is what I realized. So I'm thinking even about moves like, for example, pawn to g3. Because if this knight has to move, then everything is going to collapse here in the center. So I think pawn to g3 makes a lot of sense, because I identified that this knight is holding this entire position together. They can do the check, it's fine, because of course still they have to figure out a way to protect this. My opponent is going for a massive trade, which is okay, because again we are already at material, and this position is just simpler, I would say, to play for white. This knight inside our position is a little bit strange. It doesn't really have many squares it can go to, but it can capture this pawn for free. So I think we just have to protect it. Okay, and now I was thinking maybe there is a way that we can trap the knight. So I was thinking, is there a way I can just attack it and win it? But right now that's not really the case, because they would just be able to go here and grab the free pawn. So if we push this, we already take away their opportunity to grab the free pawn. So that if they play whatever, my plan was to maybe try and attack the knight, then trade, and then try to win that pawn as well. Because a pawn like this inside our position should be easy to win, and then we have 2 extra pawns, and that will really win us the game. But instead they are playing quite complex moves, I have to say. For example, here attacking my knight. I think I can just defend it, and that's gonna be fine. Yeah, and then they play pawn to c5. So I still have the same plan. I basically want to see if I can attack this knight, which is a very strangely placed piece. They are sacrificing it, but I think that is a little bit of an engine move. Like a human probably would have tried to play here and continue the game, but this is also losing, of course, because white will just win so much extra material. Alright, so they are giving us a free pawn. Which way should you take? Well, in general, usually taking this way is the best. But I feel like here, this is a good plan as well. Because now we have 2 rooks opened up against their position. And now we really are into a late middle game / early end game, where we have quite some material advantage. I think we are just up a full knight, if I'm correct. Yeah. As soon as you are up a full piece, you do want to exchange everything. So exchanging everything is a key strategy, because it's going to get us very quickly into the end game, which we will be able to win. So I am thinking simple moves. For example, knight. I don't want to complicate it, and I don't even want to calculate too much here. Just simple moves. Can I just simply trade? Trade. All I want to do is trade. Alright. That is very strange as well. They are basically giving me an awkward trade where they take my knight, I take their knight. I mean, it's fine. We might be losing a pawn at the end of the variation, but usually when you are up this much material, it doesn't really matter even if you lose that pawn. But we don't have to lose it. I think we could also try to protect it. Because my first question is, can I just push it? And if they try to attack it, maybe I can protect it. And if they play this, they might even be falling for a fork. So I think this looks very interesting. We might be trying to just keep holding on to this pawn. And yeah, I think we can just protect it. And if they push this, they had a fork. They don't. So we have to think, is there something here that we can do? Because we don't want them to be able to just push and win the pawn. Although, still, we are up so much material that it doesn't matter. I don't think pushing makes a lot of sense. I think we would just lose it. One thing that I also identified is, as you can see, the weak back rank. My opponent has a very weak back rank. So if I move my knight, I basically threaten a checkmate. So I think an interesting move is to play knight to e7. We threaten the checkmate, we also threaten the rook. And I think that's honestly going to be game over here. If they take the pawn, they are checkmated. If they play this, we can take it, and Now we are up so much material that honestly, I don't think there is anything they can do. Yeah, I don't think there's anything they can do. We do have to watch out we don't lose material. Let's do this. And we should be able to promote this pawn eventually. By the way, I just realized they blundered another fork. So now the game should be super easy. We can take this. I didn't really want to lose this pawn because the extra queen would have made things very easy. But even without the extra queen, this should be a winning endgame. I'm not going to play out this endgame because we are up 3 pieces. You should be able to win this. You can even sacrifice pieces for pawns and then just make extra queens. So that should be easy. But I hope you learned some very interesting Italian game strategies. If you want to see more Italian game videos or you want to see me do this for another opening, just leave a comment and I will read them. That's it.